and welcome back to the U.S. Chamber Foundation's Path Forward series. When we were together last in September, we discussed the current state of pediatric COVID-19 in the U.S. At that time, data from the American Academy of Pediatrics showed that cases among children peaked that month, as many schools opened for in-person classes amid the surge in the Delta variant. In total, more than 1.1 million children in the U.S. tested positive for COVID-19 between September 3rd and September 30th. We were all relieved on October 29th when the FDA approved the Pfizer vaccine for children ages 5 to 11, followed quickly by the formal recommendation from the CDC to administer these vaccines. This is welcome news for so many parents eager to protect their children as we head into flu season. As of last week, more than 900,000 kids in this age group have received their first COVID shot. While this is great progress, it means that just 3% of kids ages 5 to 11 have their first dose. Meanwhile, many adults are weighing when to get a COVID-19 booster shot, and some Americans are still deciding whether or not to get vaccinated. And of course, in other parts of the world, the situation is more dire, with fewer than 3% of people in low-income countries vaccinated. We're constantly reminded that COVID-19 anywhere is COVID-19 everywhere. So we need to commit to increasing vaccination rates in the US and around the globe. Today, we'll be joined by two experts to provide their perspectives on these new developments in the global fight against COVID-19. Bill McInturff is a partner with Public Opinion Strategies and a pollster for the NBC News poll. He will share the latest data on expectations for kids ages 5 to 11 and what we can do to promote vaccinations for young children. Also joining us is Stan Erck, President and CEO of Novavax. He will discuss the latest developments on his company's COVID-19 vaccine and how protein-based vaccines could change the fight against the pandemic. So let's get right to it. Bill, you lead the NBC News poll. What kind of polling have you been doing about kids and vaccinations?
Well, we started asking adults about taking a COVID vaccine in October of 2020. And then in October of 2021, we started asking people about who had children, what they would do with their kids 12 to 17, and what they would do with their children who were between 5 and 11. And we are also comparing notes with ABC, Washington Post, and the Kaiser Family Foundation. And we've also been asking questions around children vaccines.
And so what are you learning about, what is this data telling you about parents and what they're thinking about getting their children vaccinated?
Well, if your child is 12 to 17, roughly half the parents say that they will have or already have or will have that child vaccinated, half will not. And with children 5 to 11, we're getting a mixed signal. 28% of parents say that they will immediately make sure their child gets the vaccination. About 36% say they want to wait and see how other children do if there's any problems. And 37% say either no, they're not going to do it, or they're only going to do it if they're required. So we're seeing, as we saw with adults, we're certainly seeing some resistance from parents as involves vaccinating their children 5 to 11.
I don't follow the numbers nearly as closely as you do. Are the numbers but those seem like big numbers to me, right? So does it feel that there are more people hesitant to get their kids vaccinated than they were to get vaccinated themselves?
Yes, we asked that same question. A year ago before the vaccines were available, and a majority of adults a year ago said they were going to wait and see how it went. So in some ways, the progress we've made vaccinating 70% of Americans has helped allay concerns. But we're living now in America where there's two Americas. There's the 70% of America who's been vaccinated, the 30% of Americans who've not been vaccinated. And this rolls over to what you do for your children. So it's really dramatic. Really dramatic is that if you are vaccinated, we're having people tell us, a majority of people say that they will have their children vaccinated immediately. If you're not vaccinated, that's only 3%. And those parents that say they will never have their children vaccinated 5 to 11, that's over 60% of people who are not vaccinated themselves. So their own decision about their vaccination is clearly rolling over to the decisions they would make on behalf of their children.
Are there other factors that are playing a role?
Yes, I'm a pollster. Let me give you the answer. The answer is partisanship. The major difference right now is between Democrats and Republicans. If you're a Democrat, 55% say that you'll have your child vaccinated, 5 to 11. If you're a Republican, that's only 11%. So much like the 30% who are not vaccinated, the people who say they will not vaccinate their children tend to be a little more men. They tend to be in rural America, people with high school or less education, and people who describe themselves as working middle class. But right now, across multiple surveys, the most dramatic difference is partisanship, this difference between Republicans and Democrats, and you're watching partisanship have an enormous influence about your attitudes about vaccination and whether or not you'll vaccinate your child.
Is there any hope that that changes as the vaccinations are around longer, as people go to their annual checkups with pediatricians, or as vaccinations become available for children under the age of 5?
I wish I could be more encouraging in that regard. Here's a number that strikes me and is really powerful. We asked this question saying, do you think we should require vaccinations for everyone who's allowed to get one? In our country right now, that's a dead even split. But among the 30% not vaccinated, 6% say yes, 92% say no, 88% say strongly no. So on the topic of vaccinations, those 30% who've not vaccinated, 88% strongly oppose a vaccine mandate. They are telling us that they're 60% plus that they're not going to vaccinate their children. And I think it's going to, given where we are in the vaccination process, I'm not optimistic that those things and those numbers will be changing very quickly, or if at all.
So I can always talk to you all day. You have so many insights on so many topics, but let me leave you with this last question. You're talking to largely a business audience across the country. If you wanted this audience to have one takeaway, if you have one thought you wanted to leave them with, what would it be?
Well, it would be that in our other surveys, those people who are not vaccinated said they'd be the most likely to consider vaccination if it was something that was their employer's requested. And as an employer myself, as someone who runs a business, I don't like being in this situation. But I think that's the situation that we're in, that if there is going to be any movement around this core number of people who will not vaccinate, it may well be because of their employment status. And then I think the other thing that I will just say is to say that we know from other survey data there is a lot of misinformation about vaccines, and that information is increasing, not decreasing. And of course, people look to their employers for accurate information. And whatever you do as an employer, you certainly could have a role to play in terms of providing accurate information for employees to make their own decision. So I think those are two things that might be considered and might be of help from an employer perspective.
Thank you so much. And we'll send over to you a little myth-busting video we did out of a compilation of some of these path forward programs that you might find helpful, and you can help us spread it around. And any of you in the audience who would like to see it and share with your employees, just give us a shout and we'd be happy to share it. So Bill, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
So now I'd like to welcome Stan Erck, who I mentioned is the president of Novavax. And so Stan, let's just start with, for people in the audience who might not stay up on top of this, might not understand the different vaccines, tell us what you've been working on.
Well, we've been working on for at least a decade vaccines to fight potential pandemic viruses. We're actually on our third coronavirus vaccine right now, and we've made a number that to prevent against influenza pandemics. So we've been in this business for a while, and so when last January came around and the gene sequence for the COVID-19 virus became known, we started, along with the other companies, working on a COVID-19 vaccine. We use a different platform. It's what's referred to as a protein-based approach, which has been used for several vaccines over the past decades and shown to be very effective at preventing viral diseases. And so we've been developing it, and we've taken our vaccine through multiple efficacy trials in the UK, in the US, and South Africa, and shown, along with some of the other vaccines like Moderna and Pfizer, very, very potent efficacy. We showed 96% efficacy against the virus in a UK study, 100% effectiveness against severe, moderate, severe disease. So it's a very effective vaccine, and it has a bit different characteristics than the other vaccines.
So talk to us a little bit more about that, about the different characteristics. You talk about it being protein based. Why is that significant?
Well, it's significant for a couple of reasons. One is it classically it has a good efficacy profile that I've just described to you. It also has a very, very what we refer to as a benign safety profile. It has fewer side effects than the other vaccines, and importantly as well, I think is that it's very stable, so that we can store and ship the vaccine at just standard refrigerated temperatures. You don't need freezers, which is important in developed countries like the U.S. and Europe, but it's extremely important in global low and middle income countries. And this is a global pandemic. We need a global solution for it, and we think our vaccine fits that bill.
I think that refrigeration piece is really important. I'm glad that you highlighted that. And I'm glad that you pivoted to the global aspect of this pandemic. One theme on this show has certainly been that we can't get back to health anywhere until we're back to health everywhere. Right. So talk to us about the specific role you think your vaccine plays, both here in the US and globally. What is its role?
Well, again, as I said, it's suited. It's probably most suited of all the vaccines for this global role. We identified this problem like everybody did last year, and we're a small biotech company. We're now a much bigger biotech company, but we decided that Novavax on its own couldn't distribute and get approvals for this vaccine on its own in the couple hundred countries that we wanted to target. We partnered with Serum Institute of India, which is the world's largest vaccine company. Probably most people on this call have never heard of them, but they distribute vaccines to roughly 2/3 of the world's children. And so we partnered with them so they could help us not only scale up production and make a large scale production of the vaccine, but could help us distribute it. And the wisdom of that decision has been evidenced in the past couple of weeks, where we've actually gotten the first approvals of our vaccine in Indonesia a week ago. And yesterday we announced that we got approval in the Philippines. So these are two very large countries that are very spread out in their populations, and getting vaccine to them is really very important.
Well, and your vaccine will make it less complicated. Shifting back to the US, when do you expect to submit for emergency use here?
Well, we are in the process of doing that. We've publicly stated that we expect to apply for that emergency use this year. We are having meetings we're having multiple conversations with the FDA now. So we're doing 8 or 9 different countries in parallel with each other. We've already submitted in the UK. We've submitted to the European Medicines Authority, which is the FDA of Europe, along with Canada and Australia, and a number of other places. So we're juggling a lot of balls, but in the air simultaneously.
One of the things that we've been hearing about at the Chamber, I'd love to get your take on it, and maybe it's been getting better, but it's this concept of proof of vaccination for clinical trial participants. And is there stuff that we could be doing to help with that? Could you explain to the audience what that issue is?
We can use all the help we can get. Unfortunately, I had a lot of Brits mad at me because we ran a clinical trial of 15,000 people in the UK. That was our first trial there, and so everybody gets vaccinated, and they have their vaccine cards from Novavax, but they weren't accepted in Europe. And a lot of Brits take summer holidays, and they couldn't do that this last year. And so we worked very hard And now we've had a 30,000 person trial in the U.S. and the same issue. So we work very hard with groups like the CDC to acknowledge that people are fully vaccinated if they have the Novavax, even if it's only in a clinical trial. And we succeeded in doing that. So now we're working hard to make sure that that word is out to everybody who requires vaccination cards to recognize that Novavax. It's been a bit of a hard process, but we're getting there.
Everything about this is complex, isn't it?
It is.
You brought up I brought up the clinical trials and those participants, but another piece of your clinical trials is that you were very deliberate about diversity and inclusion in those trials. Can you tell us about that?
Well, we were. I think that this is what you need to do when you're vaccinating an entire population is you need to show that there aren't particular groups that benefit and some populations that don't. I think generally in vaccination that if you vaccinate one group, it's not genetic diversion doesn't typically make one vaccine work less well in a different population, but you have to show it. So we wanted to make sure we showed it, and because you can't run multiple efficacy trials, and so we showed across a very wide range of populations, both age group and racial groups, that the vaccine works equally well in each one of them.
Turning just a little bit into talking to you as a CEO, as someone who's done a really remarkable feat, I guess one of my questions is, what has this done to spur more efficient manufacturing, different manufacturing? Kind of what are the lessons you as a company take out of this experience?
Well, a lot. In fact, not just in my company, but in the industry. I mean, look what the mRNA companies have done, Pfizer and Moderna, BioNTech. They've all scaled from basically zero at the beginning of last year to the point where they can make now billions, hundreds of millions, and billions of doses, and that capacity will be there in the future. And it's the same thing we did when we started the year last year. We had roughly 100 people in the United States and 50 people in Europe to help make another part of our vaccine. And we're now at somewhere around 14 or 1,500 people, and we had manufacturing capacity that could make commercial quantities of vaccine. At the beginning of last year, we had zero manufacturing capacity. And now we've got it in 8 different countries, and we are at the rate of being able to make a couple billion doses of vaccine starting in the next month or two, along with our partners in India and Korea and in Europe, and that capacity is there and will be available, and the platform has been proven and will be available for future outbreaks, which there will be. There certainly will be future outbreaks. Of course, nobody knows when, but you want those platforms in place.
I have a couple audience questions before I get to them. Let me follow up with one other business question, which is, I'm sure that there are entrepreneurs on this video with us. I'm sure there are people watching who are growing their companies. What advice do you have for someone who's watching and saying, wow, growth at that pace is really challenging? And as they think about scaling up, what advice would you give them?
I don't know. I just had a conversation with someone who's helped watch the company grow with me. And I just made the comment, I said, what would, if I have a chance to take a deep breath and reflect on what we've done, which I rarely do, would I have started up in 8 different countries at the same time, or started up one and get that right, and then take those learnings and spread it across the other 7 countries? And I'm not sure what all those answers are. It's if you ever have to go through something like this, just hold on, because you're going to be 24/7 for a long time, and you're going to make mistakes, but you'll come around and solve those. We're a company that's based upon experiments, scientific data, and we do experiments, and experiments fail. That's what otherwise they wouldn't be experiments. And so you have to be able to look past them, learn from them, and move on as quickly as possible. The best thing you can do is to identify something that's going wrong fast, and then move on from there.
It's interesting that kind of marries up with a question we have from the audience, which is, so now as you're thinking about the future of your company and how to think about supply chain and other issues and employment and other things, how do you estimate the long-term demand? I mean, do you imagine this becomes an annual vaccine a la the flu? And how are you thinking about long-term demand?
Yeah, so it's another conversation I have almost every day, and had today as we're at year end. We're approaching December, and I have a board meeting. You tend to want to provide a budget for next year, and that budget requires a forecast of what you think revenues and expenses are going to be. We don't have a clue. It could be such a wide range in the coming years, and certainly when you go beyond 2022, in a situation where you don't know what the direction of the pandemic is going to go, but you take your best shot. So I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought on the growth issue.
No, it's a really complex question, to try to anticipate demand in the future.
Oh yes,
Something so new. It's a complex.
Sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry, I lost. But nevertheless, the point was is that so you can take two approaches, and one approach is to say what is the best case. Best case meaning what is the case where you have likely the most demand, and what's a base case, so you're being cautious about your growth in case the demand's not there. And so different companies will take different approaches. Our approach is to make sure that we are built for the best case. Otherwise, we don't want to be in a situation where we've crawled along in a pandemic and can't make enough doses. And so we'll take the best case approach to planning for the future.
So another question from the audience is, can you tell us about the cost of your vaccine compared to others?
Yes, I don't know if you mean what the cost of production or the pricing of the vaccine. The pricing is going to be in the similar range for high-income countries. What we've decided to do is take the tiered approach to pricing, and so the pricing in high-income countries like the U.S. and Europe and others is going to be roughly similar to what we see in the marketplace. But we've also, as I told you, we've made it a priority of the company to get product out in low and middle income countries. In fact, I think most of our vaccines are going to go to low and middle income countries, at least in the first 6 to 12 months. And there we've got tiered pricing all the way down to low to middle single digit dollars. And so that's going to make it purchasable in low and middle income countries.
You're getting a lot of congratulations from the audience who are impressed with your progress, how quickly you've grown, what you've done. And so I'm not reading you all of those comments, but they're coming in. And then there's a whole group of questions that could be lumped under the, oh my gosh, we're desperate to get this vaccine. When can we have it? And so specifically, we have an audience member that says, I'm in the EU and we are just desperate for this vaccine. How soon do you think we could get it?
Well, part of your audience emails me every day, so I get the question asked from around the world, and I pass it along to my employees just to make sure that they remember that a lot of people think that this is an important vaccine. And that mission's not lost on our company, and so having said that, we have filed with regulatory agencies in 8 different countries, and I think it's going to be globally approved in the coming weeks and months. And then it's a matter of getting enough vaccine. We're making vaccine at very large scale right now, anticipating approvals, and we'll be there as fast as we possibly can.
Well, it's nice. It's nice to have so many people rooting for you, but it's also hard and sad to hear these people who are desperate to get something we're lucky enough to have, right? Yep. Which is another question that I'm getting from the audience, which is relating our previous speaker, Bill McInturff, on the vaccine hesitancy that still exists in this country. And, given you've overseen a lot of science, you've been working at this for 10 years, what would you say to help us bust the myths around vaccine hesitancy?
Yeah. So I think the data are clear that all these vaccines are safe, and they are all effective. And if you look at the data beyond what Bill showed us, the data that shows the number of people that have been vaccinated that get hospitalized versus the number of people that haven't been vaccinated and get hospitalized, the numbers are 7 or 8 to 1. I mean, it's the data are so clear that vaccines help. That communication of that point should be made clear, and everybody can help in that. We additionally, we might be helping because we bring a vaccine platform, this protein-based vaccine that has a different platform than the mRNAs, and some people may be worried about some aspect of another vaccine that they don't worry about with ours. And so, but in the industry, we're bringing out multiple vaccines, and they all are effective, and the safety profiles are good. So.
We have another audience question. They're asking, are you preparing versions of the vaccine that could address different variants?
Yes. Great question, because we love that question, because our data shows that our vaccine works well against, in fact, we have some of the only efficacy data that shows it works against the variants that first came out in the UK, because when we went to the UK and did our trial, we were lucky in that the UK variant was widespread during our trial, and we showed that we had 89% vaccine efficacy against everything, and worked well against the variant. And so what you can also show, and a household name now is the Delta variant. You can also show that your vaccine has the potential to work well by showing you get good antibody levels to the Delta variant. And we've shown in our vaccine trials, and particularly with a boost, we get spectacular levels of antibodies against the Delta variant. So there's possibilities that we could change the vaccine as other variants come along, but right now I don't think we need to. But the platform allows us to make those changes as necessary. Just like in the flu vaccines, they change every year with new variants, and in the long term, we have a flu vaccine that we just had phase 3 efficacy data on a year ago, and we are now in a clinical trial with a combination flu and COVID vaccine, so that when you go in, the goal being that when you go in for your annual flu shot in the future, you'll get a flu COVID shot, and so be effective against both, including variants of those pathogens.
What an amazing feat of science and business. Can you imagine at the beginning of this pandemic that someone would be able to say, we have a vaccine and it's effective against the variants, and kids can get it? And I mean, it's quite a feat of business and science. And we're just really grateful to have companies like yours out there protecting Americans. So thank you for being with us.
Thanks for inviting me. Pleasure.
So thank you all to being with us. We will let you know shortly what our next Path Forward episode will be about. We appreciate you being with us. I hope that you're getting vaccinated. I hope we're giving you tools to help talk to your community and your family about getting vaccinated. And I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving. And I know I will be particularly thankful for these vaccines. Take care, and we'll see you soon.